Rain and more humid today, high 75. Cloudy with a shower and thunderstorm tonight, humid, low 67. Breezy, sun and clouds for tomorrow, the high at 79. Partly sunny, breezy, pleasant Wednesday, high 75. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
Light rain and 66 right now at O'Hare. Next news, 7:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Watch today's show live right now on the Income Store live video stream at 560theanswer.com.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Trump will be speaking at 8:30 Chicago time this morning, offering a postmortem on the G7. We've already had some news made, some good news on the trade front. No, not with China. With Japan, Trump and Prime Minister Abe announcing they have an agreement in principle for a deal that would include the Japanese importing more U.S. ag goods.
Prime Minister Abe and the Japanese people. You've been a fantastic friend, and we very much appreciate it. This is a tremendous deal for the United States. It's a really tremendous deal for our farmers and agricultural ranchers, and also involves other things, including, as I said, e-commerce. So it's very big, and we look forward to it, and thank you very much.
And Trump also hanging out with his mini-me, Boris. They did their Mary Kate and Ashley routine.
Well, it's the first time that they met he's prime minister. They've known each other before.
And they're very much in like, talking about Brexit. Exactly. They're talking about Brexit, to Trump suggesting Boris is the man to get the UK out of the EU. And also that big things are in store when it comes to trade between the U.S. and the UK.
And we're having very, very good meetings. So far, it's been really good.
We're going to do a fantastic deal once we clear up some of the obstacles in our path.
I guess a fantastic many deals. Talking about many different deals, but we're having a good time. As far as UK and the United States, we're working on a very big trade deal, and I think it's going to work out very well. So thank you very much. See you later. Thanks.
And the flip side, of course, is China, where there's been a war of words that led to apparently a Sunday war of words and increased tariffs by China on $75 billion worth of U.S. goods that led to allegedly a Sunday night call between the president and Xi to get back to the negotiating table.
And that's good. It's good for us and for the markets today. We hope.
Let's hope. For more on this topic, in addition to some of the international security questions being tackled at the G7, along with a surprise visitor.
Well, from Iran.
We're pleased to be joined by Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, Vice President of the Catherine Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation, author of books including Wiki at War and Private Sector Public Wars. Jim, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
I'd love being with you guys because I have a staff meeting on Monday morning and I have to go in and explain the world. And so this basically is my rehearsal.
All right, very good.
So I figure everything out.
All right,
and then I go.
Well, that's great. It's good for us. It's good for you. We'll help you refine your message to the assembled team. So why don't we start with trade policy? So you've heard the encouraging notes with respect to Japan and the UK and the impasse seeming to widen with China.
So I think the Japan agreement seems to be a relatively limited agreement. Agriculture, probably in return for the United States not imposing auto tariffs. There might be some other things in throw there. It's probably the kind of agreement that neither head of state will have to go back to their country to actually get approval from. So it is kind of an immediate thing showing, strong arms between the United States and Japan moving forward economically. So it's good news. Still plenty of space left in U.S.-Japan relations to do a U.S.-Japan FTA, which would be an even bigger deal, which would be very important, but that's probably not going to happen before 2020.
Now, President Trump, at about 4:30 our time this morning, was sitting down with Angela Merkel and taking questions from the media and said that the EU has ripped us off more when it comes to trade than China has. Is that true?
Probably not. That it is true that the United States and Germany have the lowest tariff barriers in the world between us. There are non-tariff barrier issues that we've sparred over for a long time. They complain about some of the stuff we do. We complain about some of the stuff they do. This is, I think, one of the great, when we go back and dissect the Trump years, the big debates, because everybody agrees that at some point the United States had to take China on, and everybody agrees that just saying, well, we're going to go back to the WTO probably wasn't going to get it. So that there had to be some kind of elbowing between the United States and China. I think where the experts really kind of depart on is to say, well, why is the United States, picking, kind of trade disputes with all the other countries? Why aren't they ganging everybody up on China? I think, of course, that's not the president's strategy. One issue is would it have made a difference? And I think the other issue is I think the U.S. does have some legitimate issues, and for as much as issues I have with Trump's style, somebody did need to restart the global trade conversation, and he's certainly done that. And I think we could be months and years out from understanding about whether it kind of throwing a rock at the glass house is going to actually bring positive results or not.
Well, and also, of course, a lot of pushback over the weekend to his tweet where he hereby declared that U.S. companies need to start figuring out how they're going to get out of China before he invokes what he believes are his powers under a 1977 federal statute. Of course, Larry Kudlow, Steve Mnuchin sort of downplayed that, walked it back in, suggested he's not declared any emergency. He was talking about the powers he has, but what he's really doing is just offering a little bit more aggressive Chamber of Commerce speech to American companies saying, come back to America. It's the best place to work, live, be happy.
Well, I do think that what he's saying actually does reflect a growing realization in the marketplace that of two things. One is that U.S.-China economic relations are going to be contentious for years because we're competing with each other, and that companies have to worry about getting caught in the middle of that. And the other is look, China is not a normalized actor. They don't play by the rules. And companies I think are changing their risk assessment about how dependent they want to be on Chinese supply chain and how really smart that is for their profitability and for intellectual control of their intellectual property and for national security in the long term. So I think it's more of a very kind of in-your-face reminder that companies need to rethink their risk assessment, and it's not really about the United States, dictating what we do. It's about people maybe getting smarter about what's in their own economic best interests.
So Macron invited his good friend, Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif, to the G7. Trump said with his approval, he was given the heads up. He said fine. To, I guess, have a confab with the president about the Iranian nuclear deal or the confrontations that are happening on the high seas. I mean, is there anything productive about that, or is that just a photo op for all sides?
I think it's a nothing burger. I think it's Macron trying to, play big in this issue, but I think the cards are on the table on this one. The Europeans really can't buck the United States on this, and the United States is incredibly unlikely to change its policy. And honestly, I could see where Trump would say, yeah, fine, because the U.S. policy is, if the Iranians want to talk, we're all happy about that. We're thrilled about talking. Sure, let them come talk. So I don't think it really is significant in any way, honestly.
All right. Before President Trump left, he wanted to see if he could change the G7 to the G8 to include Russia again and Putin. Is he making any progress with that?
I don't think so. I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, as long as Russia is occupying part of Crimea, I think that's just. I mean, the G7 stands for liberal economies. Otherwise, China would be a member of the G7. So I just don't ever see that happening in the near term. And I think the president actually knows that, and maybe now you're just kind of guessing, but maybe part of the reason why he says that is he's continuing to try to show Putin, hey, I'm the guy that's willing to help you and negotiate here. So maybe he doesn't have a problem promising something that he knows will never happen. But honestly, I'm not sure Putin values being in the G8 all that much anyway. So this is another one of those things where I'm not sure that really kind of means anything. You have to remember the G7 is largely just a talk fest. So when people come out of the thing and they're scratching their heads like, what the heck happened here? Like, weren't any decisions made? That's not what its purpose is. Its purpose is to let the leaders get together. And they do have some serious conversations. But then there's a lot of noise on the sideline, which may or may not mean anything. Iran, Russia, China trade deal, I honestly think that was just all side noise and no real progress is made on that.
Does Russia launching 2 ballistic missiles in the Arctic as part of a combat training exercise mean anything?
I don't think it means anything new. I'm still in the camp that says I'm not super worried about the militarization of the Arctic, because in the end, you only make money in the Arctic if everybody cooperates. There's just not a real advantage to having hard military spheres of influence in the Arctic region. As Russia does continue, I mean, legitimately, Russia is expanding its military capability, and that's an issue. But I just don't see that as a new theater of war.
He is Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, Vice President of the Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Jim, thanks for joining us.